This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
UN seeks humanitarian funding for Afghanistan as aid taps run dry. Bandits kill 12 soldiers and police officers in yet another attack in Nigeria. And the Democratic People's Republic of Korea says it has test-fired a long-range cruise missile. This is Africa Live. A warm welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up this hour, in business, Egypt to spend more than $540 million to boost tourism. And in sports, Arsene Wenger's proposal of having a World Cup every 2 years is gathering steam. We begin in Afghanistan, where 7 people have died after Afghan security personnel attacked a band of kidnappers in the northern Balkh province. Provincial officials say the gang captured 2 people, possibly for ransom. It happened in Dasht-e-Shur area near the provincial capital of Mazar-e-Sharif. The operation killed the abductors, but also, unfortunately, the abductees. One of the security personnel sustained minor injuries. Meanwhile, the United Nations is convening an international aid conference in Geneva later today aimed at raising over $600 million for Afghanistan. The UN is warning of a humanitarian crisis following the Taliban takeover. Billions of dollars in foreign donations were cut off following the collapse of the country's Western-backed government. Even before the takeover last month, half the population in Afghanistan depended on aid. The UN hopes to raise funds through the conference to ease pressure on its programs. It says the number of people in need of aid is expected to increase due to drought and shortages of cash and food. Let's get you the latest from Tony Waterman, who's live for us in Brussels. Tony, thank you very much for joining us. So what are the expectations from that meeting and why is it necessary?
Well, ultimately, what the United Nations is looking for is money, as you mentioned, hoping to raise some $600 million at this aid convention that's going to be taking place in Geneva later this afternoon. This is money that would be used to stave off a humanitarian crisis. We have heard these very dire warnings from the likes of the UN, from WHO as well. There are 18 million people who are dependent on aid even before the Taliban took over last month. And the concern is that that number is going to grow exponentially in the weeks and months to come. There are a lot of factors at play here. You mentioned the drought, the cash shortage that's at hand, but also we're talking about 20 years of a prolonged conflict that has made it difficult for people to get food supplies and to maintain healthy lives. And also, we are in the middle of a pandemic, so that is also at play here, but it is really the short-term immediacy of the drying up of humanitarian aid that is having the most impact. Billions and billions of dollars from Western countries, the United States, the EU, has been put on hold because these countries are very concerned that this money, this food, these medical supplies and equipment are going to fall into the hands of the Taliban government instead of going to the people that need it most. So they have put these programs on hold at the moment, and there won't even be talk of resuming these aid programs until there are reassurances and proof from the Taliban that they are going to, first and foremost, respect human rights, particularly for women, and also ensure that Afghanistan does not become a safe haven for terrorist activities and criminal gangs. Of course, we have seen some exceptions to this. China and Pakistan, for example, they have both already sent plane loads worth of humanitarian aid into Afghanistan. Both those countries share a border with Afghanistan, so concerns that a humanitarian crisis could spark a refugee crisis, and neither of them would like to see refugees flooding into their respective countries. Russia also said today that it plans to start supplying humanitarian aid, but when you have this type of crisis potentially at hand, this type of humanitarian crisis is going to take really a global response. And this is what this conference this afternoon is hoping to achieve.
Okay, so where is aid needed most, Tony?
Well, food and water are the two things that are needed most desperately at this point. And about 1/3 of that $600 million that the UN is hoping to raise is going to be earmarked for the World Food Program to supply food and clean water. It's also medical supplies and equipment. The WHO, the World Health Organization, warned last week that up to 90% of Afghanistan's 2,300 medical facilities could be forced to close because the Western donors that keep them open have been barred from sending over funding. So this is very crucial, again, when you have a continuing crisis, conflict ongoing, and the pandemic. So they want to keep those corridors open. Of course, the Central Bank of Afghanistan does have quite a large sum of assets, $10 billion, but this is kept largely overseas, and those assets have been frozen right now. The Taliban cannot get their hands on that money. So it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort to get the economy back up and running, and we are starting to see very, very faint signs that this is happening. You had Pakistan International Airlines, its first commercial flight landed in Kabul earlier this morning. This was a chartered flight by the World Bank that brought over officials and also journalists. So we are seeing the faint resumption of the economy. But again, this is a country in crisis at the moment, and it's going to take a lot more than that to bring it back into some semblance of stability.
All right, Tony, thank you for that update. Tony Waterman live for us in Brussels. Now, meanwhile, Taliban officials have ordered schools in Afghanistan to be segregated by gender. The group announced on Sunday that women would be allowed to study in universities. However, they must be separated from men. In an exclusive interview, Afghanistan's acting minister of higher education told us that the ministry will push for a curriculum that is not contradictory to Islamic and national values. He expects the number of students pursuing higher education to increase.
If we look at the past 20 years, we could easily figure out that most Afghan families wanted to send their children to school, but they couldn't make it due to widespread social immorality and misconduct. With the announcement of recent policies, thousands of Afghans will have the opportunity to send their children to pursue higher education. That's why I have told the private institutions that there will be an increase in the number of students after the new policy is implemented, and they have confirmed this.
Over in Nigeria, armed attackers on Saturday targeted a military base in Zamfara state. Local media reports say at least 12 security personnel were confirmed dead and 3 others wounded. The attack took place at a forward operating base in Mutumji. The incident comes amidst a heightened offensive against so-called bandits in the northwest region of Nigeria. So we've got our correspondent Tessem Akende joining us now from Jos. Tessem, what more details do you have about this attack?
Well, the attack, I would say that basically reports from local media sources. There has been no comment yet from the official security sources here in Nigeria. That said, the report has been put together. Local media sources say that these attacks came when, or the attack came when members of the armed forces carrying out several operations in Zamfara were out carrying out onslaughts on bandits who have been ravaging or causing harm in that state for a while. So that's the report we have. And then the casualty figure, according to those reports, indicate that it's made up of both personnel of the Air Force, the Army, and the police make up these casualty figures. That's what we can say about that for now.
Bandit attacks have become quite common in Nigeria. How is that particular security threat being addressed?
Well, the past 1 or 2 weeks have been, the military forces here have dealt a cruel blow on these bandits who have really carried out, who have killed people and destroyed properties for a few years now. There have been several military bombardments, especially in the last 10 days, where the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Farouk Yahya, was in Zamfara himself, leading the attacks on these bandits. There have been several of them have been killed. The government has also said, just a few days ago, the governor of the state, Bello Matawalle Maradun, said the bandits are now reaching out to the government for negotiation and for amnesty, but he says his government will not tolerate that. In the past, they've actually made out efforts to give them amnesty and forgive those who were willing to repent. But that is over now. So there's so much efforts by the government. There's also a shutdown of both data and voice calls in Zamfara state, in all the 14 local governments that make up the state. And of course, lately we had an extension of that shutdown down to Katsina state, neighboring Katsina state, all within the northwestern part of the country, all to ensure that the military goes out very well and, deals a cruel blow on these bandits who have ravaged several communities. There are several other, initiatives by the government. There's a ban on the sale of petrol or premium metal spirits, popularly called petrol, at filling stations, because it's been alleged that many people carry out fuel and give out to bandits who, in the long run carry out, which aids out their operations on motorcycles and all of that. So several, initiatives are being put together, to ensure that these are dealt, the bandits are attacked and dealt with squarely. So the operation is still ongoing. Just day before yesterday was when the Chief of Army Staff left Zamfara for Abuja, where the military are having, a conference. But the offensive is on, and the reports we have is that these bandits, it's the firepower they are receiving from the military or from the Nigerian Armed Forces is getting really, really tough. And residents of Zamfara and of course Nigeria who wants peace to reign within Zamfara, Katsina, and other states, who are really battling this banditry are really happy at what is going on right now.
All right, Tessem, thank you very much for that update. Tessem Makende live in Jos, Nigeria. Meanwhile, at least 13 people have been killed after heavy rains hit Nigeria, according to local authorities. More than 200 people have been affected by floods. Flooding has affected northern and eastern areas of Nigeria since July this year. Last month, about 20 people died because of flooding in Bauchi State. In August, at least 200 homes and wide areas of farmland were destroyed by floods in Niger State. A delegation from the West African bloc, ECOWAS, has been in Guinea for mediation efforts following a military coup. Guinean President Alpha Condé earlier this month was deposed by soldiers and has been detained ever since. ECOWAS last week suspended Guinea's membership to the 15-member bloc but did not impose further sanctions. The delegation has now met the coup leaders and said mediators have seen the deposed president. ECOWAS consultant Ken Ife says the bloc may send multiple delegations to negotiate with Guinea's coup leaders.
First mission is usually to go and find out if the president is still alive, the one that was overthrown, and then his officers, and then to know, what condition are they living under, and then maybe to demand that they be released unconditionally. So things like that's the beginning, and then after the mission comes back with a report, then they might escalate. They might now send a second mission to lay down conditions that you have to organize an election and get a new democratically elected. So you don't know what the conditions would be. It has been very, very successful, and that's why ECOWAS has very strong support from Africa, from European Union. European Union, notice that when they have conflicts in West Africa, they don't mobilize forces for it. They don't ask United Nations to come in or Security Council, or they go back to West Africa and say, send intervention force. So we are dealing with our problems in our region, and we are doing it very, very effectively.
Just over a week after the military coup in Guinea, which overthrew President Alpha Condé, life is gradually returning to normal. Let's go to the capital, Conakry, to meet traders of the city's Kaloum market to see how economic activities are resuming there.
Conakry Kaloum market is one of the markets that supply the population of the capital with all kinds of food products. The market had closed its doors to customers for 2 days because of the coup. During the period of closure, traders, most of whom are women, saw some of the fruit and vegetables rot. This caused food prices to rise after the market opened.
With the military in power, nobody knows when things can get out of hand. Just seeing a soldier with a gun in or around the market scares us. Often we are forced to go home sooner than we expected, and this affects our business.
For the moment, we can say that we are reassured because after Sunday's coup d'etat, Colonel Mohammadi Doumbouya had invited all citizens to resume activities on Monday. We came and sold some items, but the worry is that the price of foodstuff is rising and this does not help the people. Today, imported rice that was sold at 250,000 Ghanaian francs is now sold at 320,000. The current authorities must act to bring down the price of food.
Out of fear and caution, many customers had to wait for 2 days before going back to the capital's market to buy food.
The uncertain atmosphere in the city of Conakry is already scary, and staying late at the market is even more frightening. We are afraid because a military man is always a military man. He has no friends. For the moment, everything is fine here. We hope that the price of the products will go down a bit to satisfy our customers.
In most of the markets in Conakry, customers and vendors are still discussing the political crisis that is currently shaking the country. Wholesale and retail market holders praise the junta for preventing the looting of their shops during and after the coup. This has brought hope and confidence back to the Guinean people, who expect a lot from the ruling junta. Desiree Kano, CGTN, Conakry, Guinea.
16 minutes into the hour. This is Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Straight ahead. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea says it has test-fired a long-range cruise missile. And Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi launches the country's national strategy for human rights.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Democratic People's Republic of Korea has test-fired what it calls a new type of long-range cruise missile. The state news agency KCNA says the launches over the weekend were successful, with senior officials observing the event. The report says the new weapon holds strategic significance, giving the country another effective means of deterrence against hostile forces. The launches come just days after a military parade in Pyongyang to mark the country's 73rd founding anniversary. The U.S. military says the tests pose threats to the country's neighbors and beyond. Chuck Barton reports.
Normally we get information on these types of launches either from the US officials or from the South Korean government, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This time the first we're hearing about it is from DPRK Central News Agency. What they're saying is there were multiple tests of these long-range cruise missiles over the weekend. They flew for a total of 7,580 seconds. My maths might be wrong, but I think that's a little short of an hour and a half. With a total range of 1,500 kilometers. And while they were heading towards their targets, which according to the Central News Agency they hit accurately, they were flying ovals, figure of eights, patterns to prove that they were true cruise missiles and that they could deviate from their course while heading to their target, which of course makes them much harder to intercept, but it also means they can fly very low to the ground, going below hill peaks, making them very hard to detect as well. Nonetheless, South Korean media here calling it a low-level provocation so far because they don't contravene UN security sanctions targeting the DPRK. Unlike ballistic missiles, which utilize a rocket engine, these are low-flying missiles, as I just described, which use a jet engine. So the UN doesn't ban these, or the testing or the use of these missiles by the DPRK. However, this is the first time they're flying long-range missiles that can carry a bigger payload. Perhaps it won't be worrying Washington too much, but the fact that these missiles can easily reach Japan or South Korea and could potentially carry miniaturized nuclear warheads, something that Pyongyang has stated it is seeking to do, will definitely be ringing alarm bells here.
Iran will allow the United Nations nuclear watchdog to service cameras at its nuclear sites. Constructive talks were held on Sunday between the International Atomic Energy Agency and the head of Iran's nuclear program. Tehran restricted access early this year to the recording equipment which the UN installed to monitor the country's atomic activities. UN officials say they are ready to assist in negotiations to restore the 2015 nuclear deal after talks stalled. The FBI has released a newly declassified document related to its investigation of the September 11th attacks. It's the first document to be released after an executive order by President Joe Biden. It includes details of contacts between the hijackers and several Saudi officials. Toby Muse has more.
This weekend, the FBI released a heavily redacted 16-page, formally classified document related to the 9/11 attacks. The report from 2016 shows alleged contacts between a man US authorities suspect of being a Saudi intelligence agent and at least 2 of the 9/11 hijackers when they first arrived in the US. The support from the agent was alleged to have been travel, lodging and financing to help the hijackers. It also provided details about the FBI's investigation into whether a Saudi consular officer in Los Angeles had given logistical support to these hijackers. However, the document does not provide proof of any support in the 9/11 attacks themselves. Some of the families of those who died in the attacks say the contacts show there is more to investigate. Even with the unfortunate number of redactions, the report contains a host of bombshell new revelations, said the 9/11 Families United in a statement. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has consistently denied any government role in the attacks. This past week, the Saudi embassy in Washington issued a statement saying that any allegation that Saudi Arabia is complicit in the September 11 attacks is categorically false. Biden has faced repeated calls by families of those who lost their loved ones in the 9/11 attacks to release more documents related into the 9/11 investigation. Many had said that they did not want the president to attend the 20th anniversary ceremonies marking the attacks unless more information was forthcoming. The report was released just hours after President Biden arrived to the site of the World Trade Center Memorial on Saturday. Toby Muse reporting for CGTN, Washington.
A wildfire in southeastern Spain continues to burn. Spain has deployed a military unit to tackle the blaze. Nearly 1,500 people from 6 neighboring towns and villages were evacuated on Sunday to a nearby town. Volunteers brought in bottled water and necessary supplies. The wildfire started in Sierra Bamaya on Wednesday. It has forced more than 2,000 people to flee their homes, and 1 emergency worker was killed. Local authorities said the fire has razed more than 6,000 hectares. South Africa's lockdown regulations have been further relaxed as the country sees a decline in its 3rd wave of COVID-19 cases. In a televised national address on Sunday evening, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that a sustained decline in infections has been witnessed over the last 2 weeks. CGTN's Yolis Njamila has more.
South Africa has now moved down to level 2 of the lockdown. That's the 2nd lowest of a 5-tier system. The eased restrictions offer a lifeline to businesses. It's also making it easier to register voters ahead of local government elections in November. Under this level, most activities are allowed under strict rules.
The hours of curfew will now start at 11 p.m. and end at 4 a.m. There is still a need for curfew. It also means that non-essential establishments like restaurants, bars, and fitness centers will need to close by 10 p.m. This is to allow their employees and patrons to travel home before the start of the curfew. It also means that all gatherings will now be limited to a maximum of 250 people indoors. And this has been raised from the 50 people indoors, and it will now mean that outdoors it will be limited to 500 people from the 100 that we had.
The sale of alcohol from retail outlets for off-site consumption will be permitted between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. from Monday to Friday. Alcohol sales for on-site consumption will also be allowed as per license conditions up to 10 p.m. In a bid to encourage vaccination, the president also announced that his government will soon be providing further information on an approach to vaccine passports. The passports will likely be used as evidence of vaccination for various purposes and events. The president urged South Africans to vaccinate against COVID-19.
The day will soon come when we can gather again without restrictions. The day will soon come when we can fill our stadiums and music venues and travel more freely around without the fear of becoming ill or losing our loved ones. How soon that day arrives depends on one thing: how many of us get vaccinated and how quickly we get vaccinated.
Ramaphosa says the government has secured enough doses of COVID-19 jabs and that the supply of vaccines is no longer a constraint. South Africa ultimately wants to vaccinate at least 70% of the population, or 39 million people. This is to ensure that there's herd immunity against the coronavirus. The current restrictions will be reviewed in 2 weeks' time, depending on the state of the pandemic. Yudhisan Jamala for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi on Saturday launched the country's national strategy for human rights. The presidential office says the plan will help achieve a comprehensive understanding of human rights. Here's Adel Mahri with more details.
In a celebration held in the new administrative capital, the Egyptian president launched a new vision for human rights. Dubbed the National Strategy for Human Rights, the plan is divided into 4 main categories which define what rights are. They are civil and political rights, economic, social and cultural rights, rights for women, youth, people with disabilities, children and senior citizens, and finally, educating and developing skills for human rights.
This is a precedent for Egypt. It never had a national strategy for human rights before. The political leadership has been working for long on this vision. It is a leap in the political and human rights in Egypt. It aims to protect Egyptian citizens in all aspects of life. It introduces socio-political and economic rights which the state vows to fulfill.
The strategy was developed by the Supreme Standing Committee for Human Rights, a body established in 2020. It's led by Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry. During the inauguration, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi stressed that human rights is a term that should not be confined to only include freedom of speech and personal freedoms. He added that Western nations cannot dictate what type of rights other countries should focus on.
If some nation thinks it's privileged in its cultural capabilities and that they should impose it on us or other communities, I tell them, beware. This is a dictatorship path. You consider your cultural values the top, the summit. Who said so? It's the best for you, but not necessarily to me. Why don't you want us to develop in the natural way and within the time needed? They have succeeded in what they have reached in 4 centuries.
Egypt says the comprehensive human rights strategy shall be in place by 2026. The government is calling for a more active role for NGOs to help it in developing this vision. Accordingly, President Sisi has named 2022 the Year of Civil Society. Egypt is admitting that more needs to be done in the area of human rights. To achieve this comprehensive vision, the government says it needs to prioritize basic rights like proper nutrition, shelter, education and healthcare as a preparation for the public to accept and adopt more concepts of human rights. Adel Mahri, CGTN, Cairo.
Coming up in business news. Egypt to spend more than $540 million to boost tourism.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Terror attacks have severely affected Egypt's tourism industry. The Egyptian government says it will invest more than $540 million in the sector, a sign that tourism could be on the path to recovery. Here's Adel Mahri with more details.
Tourism in Egypt has been recovering slowly in the second half of 2021. In September, the nation's Tourism and Antiquities Ministry said hotel occupancy rates reached 70% in Red Sea resort cities, up from 43% in June. That follows the lifting of travel restrictions by some European countries and after Russia ended a 6-year-long ban on flights to Egypt.
As a tour guide who speaks Russian, we have been greatly affected since the 2015 Russian plane crash. It is by far the worst incident that happened which concerned Egypt. COVID-19 was global. It made the situation worse. We had no work at all. We looked for alternatives and we have managed to expand the Ukrainian market and other Eastern European countries, which made up for part of the drop in tourism revenues.
In recent months, the Egyptian government has been promoting the country as a tourist destination. It has introduced electronic visas for the first time. Almost all fees for flight services at Egyptian airports have been reduced or waived. Moreover, all workers in the tourism sector have been vaccinated and health preventive measures have been imposed.
There are a lot of measures in place. As you can see, we're all wearing masks. I've been vaccinated, as have many Egyptians have had the vaccine as well. And our travel was conducted with international PCR tests as well. So I feel very safe traveling to Egypt.
There was a 92% drop in tourism revenues after the COVID-19 pandemic hit Egypt. This year, the country is expecting to rake in up to $7 billion in tourism revenues as the sector recovers. That's about 54% of 2019's $13 billion revenue. Tour operators, though, are still worried as their debts have piled. Unless the sector fully recovers, they say they could face a financial crisis.
We paid monthly salaries of about $64,000 every month. Later it went down to half this amount. We took loans from the state to pay the salaries, and until now we haven't begun paying our debts. Tourism must return to normal rates for at least 3 years to cover these debts. The sector is starting to recover. It won't be back to normal until we learn how to coexist with the pandemic.
From the 2011 uprising, terrorist attacks that followed it, the 2015 Russian plane crash, and finally the global pandemic, Egypt's tourism industry has been getting one hard blow after the other for the past 10 years. As tourists' numbers picks up, Egypt is expanding its investments in this industry to maximize revenues in the coming years. Adel Mahri, CGTN, Cairo.
Over to Nigeria, where the price of liquefied petroleum gas has surged by over 80% in the last 8 months. The rise in LPG costs is forcing citizens to seek alternatives like firewood and charcoal. But, as CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports, health and environmental experts worry that such options are hazardous to people's health and the environment.
It's almost dinner time at the Danjuma home, and 42-year-old mother of 5, Abigail Danjuma, struggles to flame up the firewood for her cooking, an alternative to which she's resorted owing to the soaring price of cooking gas. A 12.5 kilogram cylinder of cooking gas rose from 3,200 naira in August of 2020 to an average 6,000 naira now. For families like Abigail Danjuma's, cooking gas has become a luxury they can no longer afford.
The price of gas has doubled. We can't even afford to refill our cylinders. That's why we choose other cooking alternatives. We usually buy for 200 naira, which lasts for several days. However, the challenges of using firewood is the smoke which chokes us and makes us cough. It also affects my eyes.
Over 90 million of Nigeria's 200 million strong population live below the poverty line of $1 a day. It's exacerbated by the COVID-induced unemployment, rising inflation, among other factors, leaving many like Abigail with cooking options that put them at risk of falling sick.
The lungs have their own defense mechanism. They tend to have a way of bringing out sputum, which we cough out, and clearing the airway. When someone has inhaled smoke for a long time, this defense mechanism of the lungs tend to be reduced, and so the person is more susceptible to viruses and bacterial infections of the lungs. So even though we've not yet done studies, but we can say that it could worsen the effects of corona for people who get exposed to the virus, or it could also, make people more susceptible.
Aside the health hazards, the environmental safety is also being threatened.
One of the major causes of climate change, that is the use of firewood. Any country that depends solely on firewood for energy is actually causing danger to its citizens and to its own environment. When you pollute the environment with smoke, it rises, it depletes the ozone layer, and exposes us to more dangerous rays, from the skies. It also depletes the soil fertility because the topsoil is burnt off through this unregulated burning of either trees or bushes. And since the soil is threatened, you see that even the fertility of the soil is compromised.
Gas marketers, in a statement, attributed the rising cost of the commodity to the government's reimposition of VAT on imports. Nigeria produces only 40% of its total gas consumption. The rest is imported. But the government says it's rolling out an elaborate plan to boost the use of gas from 5% to 90% over the next 10 years. It's a plan that would steer people away from the use of harmful cooking fuels to more efficient and cleaner energy sources. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo say copper and cobalt sales rose significantly in the first half of this year compared to the same period last year. The country's mineral sector took a hit when global prices plunged at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
After a very difficult 18 months because of the pandemic, the DRC's Ministry of Mines says the sale of copper and cobalt has risen by 10% and 15% respectively compared to 2020. The price of copper reached a record high earlier this year thanks to improved industrial activity in China, the world's largest consumer. Revenues from the mineral dropped significantly in 2019 due to low levels of demand. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic further led to a slump. The DRC is the largest producer and exporter of copper in sub-Saharan Africa. It's also the world's biggest cobalt producer. The mineral is used for making batteries for cell phones, computers, and electric cars. A high demand from the electric vehicle battery sector has boosted cobalt prices since the beginning of this year. Financial experts expect the prices to remain high for the rest of the year. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The South African agricultural sector has had a good production and harvesting season. August tractor sales of 724 units were almost 56% more than 465 units sold in August last year. CGTN's Angela Kupler has the story.
Not only are tractor sales up, 14 combine harvesters were sold in August. And on a year-to-date basis, combine harvester sales are now 25% up on last year. And that's due to the good crop yields.
South Africa is having one of the fantastic seasons in 2020-21 production season. Because now, I mean, that's like the second largest on record, around about just over 16 million tons.
Farmers in the summer cropping areas have just had a good harvesting season, had a good production season. It's not quite a record maize crop, but it's one of the highest maize crops ever. The soybean crop, which is the second biggest crop, is the highest crop ever. And overall, commodity prices have been good. So the farmers' net income has been good.
That net income growth has led to many farmers replacing their machinery.
The tractor sales, as one of the important indicators, have been growing by double digits in South Africa since about mid-2020 coming into this year.
It's important to have good equipment because a lot of the processes in agriculture are timeless. So they've taken the opportunity to replace equipment, not just tractors, but combine harvesters as well.
Tractors and combine harvesters make up 75% of the monetary value of the new agricultural machinery market, which is estimated at $715 million, and most of it is imported.
The prices have improved because of the stronger rand, but it's still a very, very competitive market. So everybody sharpens their pencils very, very carefully in accordance with what the rand value at which they brought in the machine was and is likely to be.
The agricultural sector had a good season. Confidence is high, harvests are up, commodity prices have improved, and exports are solid with a $1.5 million agricultural trade surplus. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A group of Ugandan tailors has found a way to alter their business model to minimize the effects of COVID-19. They say the secret is in the material they're using. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports from Kampala.
Willie Mwangi is designing craft shoes made from leather. It's a new material for Mwangi and a new product with promising returns.
Why I prefer these craft shoes, we can sell to the communities. And apart from this community, we were going around. We had some other boys who did not have work, some youth who did not have work at that lockdown. We were giving them the shoes. They were going around and selling them.
Mwangi used to design clothing made from fabric, but in April last year, he had to close down his business.
I was also affected by a pandemic because there was lockdown. There we say at Chikovo, there was a lockdown. The shops were closed, and we were not traveling anywhere.
The COVID-19 lockdown also affected textile shipments into Uganda. So when he was able to reopen his shop, he started working with leather, which is readily available to make a number of finished products. Mwangi says he makes about 100 pairs of craft shoes per day, but it's still not enough to meet the growing demand of leather products on the market. Uganda has historically exported 90% of its leather. The Ugandan Tailors Association sees crafting the raw material into finished products as a great opportunity.
We are looking to see that we encourage our tailors to go into leather products because it's a wider business. And it has the wider market within the country and outside Uganda.
The association is also targeting the country's developing automotive industry.
When the pandemic came in, also, the innovations come in, because our automotive mobile buses from Chira, it's now in place. So we are also looking to see that we design the bus seats So this also will drive us into a business, a bigger business.
But for Willie Mwangi and other independent tailors, the decision to venture into leather products is gradually helping their businesses to recover from the effects of the pandemic. He says he now receives regular orders from neighboring countries such as South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Hilara Yesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
You're watching Africa Live. We're taking a short break. Coming up, we tell you how one sanctuary is saving owls from deadly superstitions in Zimbabwe.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In some communities in Africa, the sighting of an owl is superstitiously seen as a warning of impending misfortune or even linked to acts of sorcery. One owner of a bird sanctuary in Zimbabwe is, however, determined to change that perception and educate people about the owl. Farai Mokutuya reports.
A frightening aura has been woven around the owl, making it the emblem of negativity, for strong reasons, according to some.
Owls are not good because they usually move at night. If there was nothing sinister about them, we would see them by day. But we only see them at night because that's when they are sent by those who want to do bad things.
However, others believe the winged creature is the victim of uninformed superstition.
I'm at the Kuimbashiri Bird Sanctuary on the outskirts of Harare. There are over 170 different types of birds here that have either been orphaned or injured. It is home to 9 out of the 12 owl species found in Zimbabwe.
Lifelong bird enthusiast Gary Stafford is trying to demystify stories about the bird.
People love to create stories about things they don't understand. And owls is one of them. And of course, the owls get the blame for a lot of things. But of course, it's not true. And a lot of us are taught that owls are nocturnal. It's not true. Most owls will fly in the daytime as well.
He is highlighting the owl's role in maintaining a natural balance.
Owls like to live with near people. Not all of them. But the barn owl, spotted eagle owl, they like to live with people because they eat the rats that human habitation attracts. So when people are living there, they throw food out everywhere, they litter, rats breed, and the owls eat that.
Perceptions are changing. Aspiring conservationist Tonderai Madzia never imagined he would get up close and personal with an owl, but has built such a strong bond with 4-month-old Oscar, who's at the sanctuary with a broken wing.
The first time I received Oscar, I was scared. And my supervisor here, last one, he said, when you're training birds, a bird have to sleep before you sleep. And our boss said you have to take it home, or whether you can take it, you can keep Oscar here. So I decided, I know I can keep Oscar here. So I started to keep Oscar, feeding him 4 times a day.
More minds are being changed as thousands of people visit the sanctuary every year and come away with a better understanding of the owl. Farai Mokutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And coming up in sports news, Arsene Wenger's proposal